Hello, everybody. Welcome back to what is going to be a very special Petri dish. Because while we have done many of these Petri dishes over the years, Dimitri here actually has a direct connection to Petri because he used to run the infrastructure or a consultant on our infrastructure many, many years ago. Dimitri, it is good to chat again. How have you been, my man?
Hey, yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
Good, good. So, jumping into the time machine, I think it was like 2015 through like 2017, somewhere around there, back in the day when Petri had its own server infrastructure. You were helping out with Tim and helping, honestly, just keep the site online.
Yeah, so I kind of joined the team remotely, and we had some pretty big tasks that we
Yep.
had to do. We migrated the full infrastructure to a different provider. We moved over to Nginx because I think you guys were using Apache back then.
Mm-hmm.
We upgraded everything. We optimized security, performance. We made sure that the system is going to be scalable in the future. And I think you are still running on the same infrastructure, right?
No, we've migrated because we eventually needed additional resources and for good reasons. Things just
Yeah.
continued to evolve, so we ended up migrating less than a year ago. Less than a year ago. It was, I want to say, about June of 2020, I believe, is when we started to migrate. So
So that means that our infrastructure lasted for like 5 years.
yeah, it had it. I mean, we all looked at it and said like that had a good run. Like it lasted what it was designed to do, and thankfully the site continued to do well and continued to grow. And we just outgrew it and needed, honestly, because part of the reasons why we're talking today is that you moved on. You've moved on and you've done bigger and getting there better things, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So why don't we take it from there, from when you left Petri, or not left Petri because you were on as a consultant, but when you stopped working with us and started to do your own thing. Like start to tell us about that story.
Yeah, so I was kind of working with Petri, I guess, in parallel. So I wasn't exclusively just doing that. We had some like pretty busy weeks when we did some pretty big projects, but other than that, I had enough free time to run my other projects. And yeah, I eventually started my first real startup called Perfabs. We did load balancing for distributed systems, so
Mm-hmm.
we could load balance services like CDN providers, and we actually monitored their performance from many different locations at the same time, so we could understand how they perform in every region, in every city, in every country, and then we could do smart routing based on that data in real time. I raised, I think, $1.2 million for the company, and eventually, after I don't know 4 or 5 years, I left, and here I am. I think like almost a year ago, I started my second startup, which is AppFleet. Yeah.
And that's what we're here to talk about today. So let's talk about AppFleet. I believe you've just launched. Is that correct? Like we're right around the launch period for AppFleet.
Yes. So we launched on March 1st, but we launched our production version. We were in beta for many months, and we worked with many people over the past, I guess, 4 or 5 months. So we improved things, we made the system more stable, we added more features, and finally we decided that we are ready to run production workloads.
So what is it? So let's just take a step back. I mean, what is your elevator pitch to either potential clients or investors? Like, what is AppFleet?
So AppFleet is a cloud platform that allows people to run their services on the edge. So instead of hosting your code base, your applications in a single region, like you normally do, either with a cloud provider or with dedicated servers, with AppFleet, you can actually scale that globally. So you run your code in multiple regions at the same time, and we handle the clustering for you, the load balancing for you, failover, pretty much everything.
So it's you define it on your website as Edge Docker hosting made simple. So are you primarily working with Docker at this time, or what's the actual infrastructure that is allowing you to run your code at the edge?
Yeah, so on the back end, we utilize Docker containers. But since it's containers, you can actually compile inside pretty much anything that you want. And that's kind of one of our key features because it made us very, very flexible. There are multiple services out there that solve similar problems, but they are always very, very limited. They can only run HTTP applications. They force you to use certain languages, certain frameworks. In our case, we don't have any of those limitations because we use containers, right? So even if you have some kind of legacy PHP or Java application, you can easily, within a few minutes, compile that in a container and run it on AppFleet. And actually, soon we are going to allow people to just connect their GitHub repositories, and we're going to do the compilation ourselves. So you don't even have to do that.
Wow. So are you doing the DNS work as well? So you're running on the edge. How is everything being connected together? Is this, I mean, are you effectively the DNS provider, or how does that work?
So AppFleet is a complete platform. So we have the CPU, we have the resources, we have basically the full package that you need. We're not just a DNS provider. So basically you pay for the resource that you use, and that could be, you can scale infinitely. You can start with one CPU core and 1 GB of RAM and scale it to hundreds of instances with hundreds of gigabytes of RAM. And we are not the kind of the layer like a DNS provider is, where we just do the load balancing, routing for you. We do everything. We clusterize your application. We gather the data. We allow you to debug it with our web consoles. We have your logs. And basically if you're familiar with Heroku, it's very similar what we do, but imagine the next level of Heroku, where you have global regions where you can scale as much as you need instantly without any limitations, because Heroku is HTTP only.
Gotcha. So, okay, other questions here that I think people might have. So let's talk about redundancy, right? It's great to be able to run things on the edge, but talk us through how, we're all worried about Azure AD went down 48 hours ago or something like that. Let's talk about redundancy. How does your service fit into just honestly to keeping applications online?
How we achieve high uptime. We have redundancy layers on every single module in our system. So from the first instance where we get the request from the user, we start deciding where that user should be routed. And we have many data points. What is his location? What is the where he's supposed to go based on the latency? And then we check if that region is actually online. So for example, if New York goes down for some reason, we can just reroute the users to Los Angeles or anywhere else, really. Once we have rerouted the user correctly based on uptime and performance, then he hits our infrastructure in that region. And there we also have multiple layers of redundancy. So we have multiple nodes running in a single data center or multiple servers. So if one server is down, again, we can detect that and automatically reroute the user to the next available server inside the data center. Next, on the server itself, we have, again, multiple modules running. So the user, the request from the user is going to first hit one of our virtual machines, where inside we have the container running itself. And again, we monitor both. So if something happens, we again reroute to the next level thing, we start a new instance, and so on. And at the, last level, we have the application itself that's running of the user. And we also have, again, redundancy there so that we proxy every single request locally. And for example, if the container is down or it's redeploying or anything else, really, we just pause the connection, we quickly start a new one, and then we start routing traffic again. So from the point of view of the user, he will never notice any kind of downtime from basically any point of the world, and regardless of what happens. I guess that's our goal, and we are trying to make sure that never happens, really.
Sure. What about security, though? Because every time we talk about the edge, they always say the S in IoT stands for security. While the edge can be defined many ways. How do you approach security with AppFleet?
Yeah, so security is very difficult, but it's even more difficult with edge services that utilize the serverless logic. So we are not strictly a serverless provider. There are providers out there like Amazon Lambda, Cloudflare Workers, and they actually run the code sandboxed inside like different layers of protection. In our case, it doesn't really happen. We actually dedicate to each user his own VM with dedicated resources, and inside the VM, we are running the container. So even if something happens and a hacker or the user finds a way to get outside his container, nothing really happens because he will still be inside the virtualized machine that is dedicated just to him. So we made sure that even if you start abusing your machine, or even if you start trying to DDoS it, start fork bombs or anything else, really, it doesn't impact anyone else other than yourself. So you're just breaking your own application for no reason.
Gotcha. That's good to know. What about pricing? Because that's where everyone's going to come back to. And it's like, okay, Dimitri, you sold me. How does the licensing and pricing model work?
Yeah, so we charge for the resources that you use. The lowest plan that we have is $10 per month, but we actually charge per hour. We just use monthly numbers just to simplify things. And then it's up to the user to scale as he sees fit. So you can start, when you create a cluster for your application, you can decide how many regions you want, how many instances in each region you want. And after that, you can also set up auto-scaling so that, for example, if your CPU usage is very high, we can auto-scale to add more instances to your cluster. Of course, you're going to pay for that, but it's going to be per hour, and then we can then downscale back so you don't get charged as much. Yeah, and the last one is, of course, traffic. We charge per gigabyte, and we actually made sure that traffic from all over the world is priced the same. So you do not have to worry about, expensive traffic coming from Asia or India, and, cheaper one is in the Europe. We have one price for everything. You don't have to worry about anything.
Well, that's good. That is good. Now, if people want to learn more about AppFleet or get in touch, what's the best way to either find, I can tell them it's appfleet.com, but if people want to get in contact with you or just honestly just kind of learn a bit more about the platform, what's the best next course of action?
Well, actually, if you write to AppFleet support, I'm definitely going to send a message because our support is currently handled by myself and our team of developers. So because we want to make sure that all user feedback is heard by the dev team that can actually impact and make sure that we solve the user's problem. So yeah, just write support and I'm going to see it, or just write to me directly. My email is d@appfleet.com.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate your time getting to talk about AppFleet. To everybody watching this, you'll find links either on the post on Petri.com, or if you're on YouTube, it'll be down in the description, or if it's in one of our many emails, it'll also be in the email. But we appreciate you taking out your time and obviously just helping keep Petri online many, many years ago. And to everybody else, we'll catch all of you right back here next time on the Petri Dish.